Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Iyov, the Tzofar Iyov, the book of Job. We are up to chapter 20. We have just read Iyov's response to Bildad, the second of the three friends, in which he criticized his friends for their anger at him. Why are they directing their anger at him? Why don't they look at him the same way they knew him their whole lives, that they know that he is an innocent and a good man? And you have also explained again, his anger, his problem is with God. His question is, why am I suffering so? And that ultimately only God can and will, according to Iyov, one day vindicate him and declare his true innocence. But his friends, as we'll see, are doubling down on their assumption that Iyov must be guilty. If he's suffering, he must be guilty. By now, these friends are so deeply convinced that they're right, and so convinced that Iyov is wrong, that they look at Iyov as a Rasha, as an evil, wicked person who's suffering. When he was their friends a long time ago, they thought he was a great guy. Now he's suffering, they think he's a bad guy. And we'll see from what Tzofar says how deep this it has become ingrained in their hearts. Vayan Tzofar ha-Na'amati vayomar. Tzofar the Na'amati responded, and said as follows: Lochein si'ipai yeshivuni. Therefore, or like so, my thoughts are pushing me to answer. This is the way the way Rashi describes it, as like a defense mechanism. You know, my thoughts that are deep inside me, they're forcing me to speak. In other words, all the thoughts that come to me while you talk are forcing me to answer with anger, really, as we're going to see in a moment. Uva'avor chushi bi. And because of the suspicions, and in this part of the verse I'm translating similar to the Ramban here, my suspicions that are within me, that I sense, that's why I'm speaking. In other words, I suspect that you really aren't such a great guy like we used to think. And because of this, that's why I'm talking. Musar kalimosi eshma, this is verse 3. The pain and the musar here is the punishment, sort of the embarrassment and the shame of being criticized, like you, Iyov, are criticizing me and the others of here, right? Eshma, I hear this. I hear and I feel this pain, this criticism. V'ruach mi binasi ya'aneni. And therefore the spirit within my understanding, because of the way I understand things, my feelings are making me speak in such a way. So, in other words, I'm getting insulted. You're insulting me. The chutzpah, the incredible audacity of someone to say that he's insulted, like he's hurt. When think about the one who is actually suffering, Iyov. And here it is Tzofar saying, I'm so insulted that I have to speak and be angry at you. It's appalling. And we see this happen so often in this world. You know, when someone is suffering really, terribly, and then the narcissist says, well, when he's criticized, you're insulting me. Hazos yodato mini ad, right? Don't you know this forever, from time immemorial, so to speak, from way back? Mini sim adam alayar, from the time that human beings were placed on this earth, right? You know this. You know how. What do you know? You know how evil people are treated. In other words, you are a Rasha. You are a bad person. You are a sinner. He's saying to Iyov, and this is what happens to sinners. And he's about to go off on a very graphic description of what a sinner's life is like. A lot of his observations are very interesting and very illuminating, and really do describe what many evil people do go through. But the way he's directing this at Iyov is kind of appalling. Iyov, who we know to be a righteous person based on the testimony of God himself. So, but here he goes in verse 5. Ki rinenat rishaim mikarov. The joy and the fun that the evil person has is very short. It's very quick. It ends soon. V'simchat chonef adei roga. And the happiness, the pleasure of the chonef, the one who is a flatterer, right? Adei roga. It only lasts for a minute. Im ya'aleh lashamayim si'o. Even if his greatness, his moments of fame, his 15 minutes of fame, right, are so great that he goes up to the heaven. He has 14 million followers on TikTok or whatever. Viroshola of Yagia, and his head reaches to the clouds. Kigelelola netzach yoved. Nonetheless, he is going to be lost forever, destroyed forever, just as if he was a piece of dung, a piece of animal refuse. The Ro'av Yomru Ayo, and those that saw him at once, saw him being big and famous, right, will one day say, where is that guy? Whatever happened? Ayo, whatever happened to that guy? Verse 8, Kachalom Ya'uf, like a dream, it floats away, V'lo yimtza'uhu, and you can't find it, and so he'll be gone. V'yudad kichazyon laila, he will be moved away, pushed away, sent away, just like a vision of the night. Ayin shizavatu, this is verse 9, velo tosif. The word l'shazef, and now in modern Hebrew it came to mean to tan under the sun, but the origin of the word is, we see here, is shizafatu, means to gaze, like the rays of the sun, or a person would gaze upon something. So ayin shizafatu, eyes would gaze upon him, right? Velo tosif, but they don't do it anymore. People used to look at him admiringly, look at that rich guy, look at that famous guy, but no one's doing that anymore. Velo od tishurenu mikomo, people no longer see him in his place. He used to sit all the way in the front. He always was on the stage, but now he's nowhere. Banav yiratzu dalim, his children, in order to make do, because he lost all his wealth, children, in order to make do, they have to yiratzu, they have to ingratiate themselves with the poor. They have to get by begging from even poor people. V'yadav tashevna ono, and his hands, he has to give back the wealth that he accumulated in a bad way. The wealth that he accumulated in a dishonest way. Atzmosov malu'u alumav, his bones, right, are even though they're full of his youth. In other words, even before his time is up, v'imo alafar tishkav, nonetheless they are already lying down in the dirt together with him. In other words, his life is spent long before he reached his full potential, the time when he should have been able to live to with full strength. In this next verse 12, it now pivots to, he mentioned before how the evil person, his 15 minutes of fame don't last. They shrink away, they go away, they pass quickly with time. In verse 12, it pivots a little to the evil person, how he lives his whole life waiting for the time that he'll be able to carry out his evil plans. Im tamtik b'fiv ra'ah, if within his mouth evil is sweet to him, yakridena tachat lishono, he will hide it underneath his tongue. In other words, waiting, so people, when he opens his mouth, people don't see what his plans are. But one day he's going to release it. Yachmolo leha v'lo yazvena, he cares about it, he loves it, and he won't let go of that dream of evil. He just refuses to let go of the dream of evil. V'yimno'ena b'sochiko, and he will keep it held inside his mouth. Lachmo b'me'ov nehapach, his bread is being turned upside down and mushed around and ground up within his stomach. Mirorat pisonim b'kirbo, it is like the venom of a snake within him. In other words, he's constantly waiting for that moment. Another way of understanding these verses is understanding that it's not so much that he's waiting to perform evil, but that the evil that he's hiding within him, he's putting on a face of being a righteous person, a good person, and so on and so forth. But he himself knows that the way he accumulated his wealth was by oppressing others, was by lying, by cheating. And that, uh, unless he's a sociopath, in which case he doesn't care. But a person who's not a sociopath or a psychopath, within him it eats him up from inside, like Chayil Bola Vayikienu. It's like he swallowed all these riches, but he vomits it out one day. Mi bitno yorishenu el. God empties it out of his stomach, either through guilt is one way of understanding it, or eventually he gets caught. Eventually he gets exposed, and eventually that wealth gets vomited out because God makes it happen. Rosh Pisanim Yinak, he has, Yinak is the language of he nursed from the heads of a poisonous snake. Pitanim is a type of poisonous snakes. So it's like he sucked the venom out of these snakes. Tahargeu l'shon efeh, the tongue of the efeh is another kind of snake, a viper. He gets killed by it. In other words, it's like the poison within him eats him up inside. Al yere biflagos naharei nachale dvash v'chema. He will never see the streams, the enjoyment that comes from the flowing of milk and honey. In other words, because he's so bitter inside, he could never appreciate anything good. He's always, it could be in many ways to understand this, either because he's always worried someone's going to find him out, someone's going to uncover him, someone's going to accuse him, or it's just simply because the guilt eats him from within that he can never even enjoy the good things in life, or because he's always worried that he's going to be caught. Meishiv yoga v'lo yivla. He gives back that which he worked for, that which he tried for, v'lo yivla, and never swallows it. Kichel timuroso v'lo ya'alos. The riches, the value of the riches, the things that are worth so much, v'lo ya'alos, he never gets a chance to chew it and digest it. Why? Ki ritzatz ozav dalim. Because how did he get his wealth? Because he smashed and crushed the poorest of the poor, those who are abandoned. Bayis gazal v'lo yivneo. He stole homes from people. It's the image of a terrible landlord who, kicks out the poor and doesn't help build the house and doesn't help keep the house in good shape. Ki lo yadash olev b'vidno. Because he will never know peace within his stomach. Some understand bivitno to refer to his children, right? Those that come from his batan. His stomach is not stomach the way we know; it's from his inside, right? So, or it could also mean he'll never know peace within his stomach, as we've been saying over and over again, that he never knows peace within his stomach because there's always guilt. There's always the worry that someone will catch him and uncover him, and eventually it will happen. It will come out. It will be known. Bachamudo lo yimaleit. He cannot even save or the ones that he loves the most. Right? That's the way most of the classic commentaries understand this phrase. You can also understand that Bachamudo, within the things that he loved, in other words, within the riches and the wealth that he desired so much and worked his whole life to get in illicit ways, lo yimaleit, he can't be saved by them. He can't run into his fancy house or car or whatever and be saved by them. It doesn't work because they're being taken away from him. Ein sarid liachlo, there's nothing left. Again, there's various ways to understand. This is verse 21. There's nothing left to all of the things that he had gathered, right? Or you can understand there's nothing left of the food that he had amassed. There's not a shred of it left. Al kain lo yachil tuvo. This is why, in such a way, right? Lo yachil tuvo, his fortune will never be good for him, right? It will never become successful. Yachil meaning from the language of chel, from wealth, right? Whatever good he does gather will never achieve its full potential. Bimlos sifko yetzerlo, right? When he achieves his aims, bimlos sifko, when he achieves what he's always wanted, yetzerlo, he still won't be enough for him. He'll still feel like he wants and needs more. Kol yad omel tivoeno, right? all types of bad things will come his way. Right? He's always going to be nervous. He's always going to be worried. He's always going to want more. He's never going to be satisfied. Yehilim alevit, no. This will be what fills up his stomach. In other words, this kind of angst and pain and worry and torture will be what fills up his inside. Yishalach bo charon apo. May God, right? And this here, Ramban explains, is referring to God. May God send his anger against, or actually not may God, it's not sent in the form of a prayer, but right, God will send his anger against him. V'yamter alemu b'lechumo, and he will rain his weapons of war against him and upon him. Yivrach mineshek barzel, he will end up running away from iron. Neshek here is arrows or flying objects. Nowadays it's used for like artillery or bullets, right? Tachlefehu keshet nechusha. He will be shot with a bronze bow. Sholaf vayetze migeva. It will be drawn, and it will be stick out of his body. In other words, it would be driven right through his body. Uvarok mimro raso, and the blade, the flash of the blade, will go straight through his gallbladder. Yaloch halav emim, and terror and fear will be what passes over him. Kol choshech tamun litzpunav, the things that he hid away, the precious treasures that he hid away, or his secrets that he hid away, they will be buried in the darkness. Tochleu eish lo nupach, they will be eaten up and destroyed by a fire that's not even is to blow to fan a flame, right? So this is just a glowing flame that will eat it away from the inside. Yeira sorid bi ahalo. Right? Anyone who is left within his tent or his family or in his group, right? Only evil will happen to him. Yigalu shamayim avono. Eventually, the heavens will reveal his sin. He won't be able to hold the secret that's been eating him up from inside. One day will come out. And the eretz miskomim alo, and the earth, right, the entire creation will stand up against him. And this, in many ways, I just read verse 27. This does describe what happens to many evil people. Their secrets eat them up from the inside. Eventually, it becomes exposed, and the higher they rise, the harder they fall. So there is a lot of wisdom in what he's saying. The difficulty here is in that he's applying this to Eov. He's calling Eov this evil person, and therefore asking him to, begging him to repent of his evil ways. Yigel yevul beso nigaros biomapo. His house, all of his belongings will be thrown out into the sea. Nigaros biomapo. They will spill forth, pour forth on the day of his anger. In other words, God's anger, the capital H. Zeh chelek adam rasha me'elohim. This is the portion of an evil man from God. This is the portion that God gives an evil person. V'nachalat imro me'el. And this is the inheritance that he gets, which God has spoken that he should get. This was Tzofar's description to Eov of what stands and what waits for an evil person, in his attempt to encourage Eov to recognize the evil of his ways and repent. And this is obviously an extremely powerful a chapter, which does in many ways describe the lives of a dishonest sinner who rises to fame and then is exposed as a fraud and eventually becomes crushed by the world around him. We do see this kind of justice happen to such people many times. Unfortunately, though, not always. But it happens. It does happen. So it is a very insightful description of a Rasha, but a very poor time and person to use it against. Thank you so much for studying chapter 20 with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 21 and this entire book of Eov together. Have a wonderful day.